will take me through it all.
He'll make a way.
Storm clouds may rise and strong winds may blow, but I know the Lord will take me through it all.
He'll make a way for me. I'm going to hold out till He grows.
God
God has just begun to make a way.
I'm gonna hold out.
To hold out till He grows.
God
has just begun to make a way. Storm clouds may rise,
strong winds,
winds may blow,
but I know
the Lord
will take me.
take me through it all. You make a way.
Storm clouds
Clouds may rise,
and strong winds,
winds may blow,
but I know will take me through it all.
you make a way.
I'm gonna hold out.
To hold out till He grows.
I'm gonna hold out.
Till He grows.
I'm gonna hold out.
To hold out till He grows.
I'm gonna hold out.
Till He grows. Till He grows. Till He grows.
Say hold out.
Till He grows.
Hold out.
Till He grows.
Don't give up.
Don't give up.
Don't give in. Just hold out.
Till He grows.
Upset.
Don't give up. Don't give in.
Hold out.
Till He grows.
I'm gonna hold out.
I'm going to hold out till He grows.
God
Has just begun to make a way for me.
The Bible says it is with the mind that we serve the Lord. It is with the mind that we serve the Lord. The mind is the battleground. It is the place where the greatest conflict is. There are more people in this room having trouble in their mind than there are people having trouble in their finances. The struggle is in your mind. This is why we have people who go to bed tired and wake up tired. Slept 8 hours and you wake up still tired. The reason you wake up tired is that you got sleep but you didn't get rest. Your mind has been in turmoil all night long. You've been wrestling in your sleep. Have you ever woke up and your bed was wet? The bed is all tore up just just like you've been in a fight because your mind has not rested. Your body went to sleep, but your mind is still caught up in a warfare. Your mind is a battleground. Touch somebody and tell them the enemy's after your mind. Out to worry you to death, out to stress you to death, out to break you down, out to make you quit, out to make you think that you can't get up, out to make you give up on your dream. The warfare is in your mind. It's not in your checkbook. It's not in your savings account. It's not on your job. The fight that you got to fight is in your mind. And if you whip it in your head, you can whip it in your checkbook. You can whip it on your job. You can whip it out of your children, but you got to cry it out of your head.
There's a leak
sing my song. I'm just moving a little closer to home. When you see me praising the Lord, y'all, I'm just moving closer to my heavenly home. Hey, moving. I'm moving. Yeah. Ooh. I'm moving. Oh, moving home. Moving home. I'm moving. Oh, I've got another building. A building I made. Another building.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is with great pleasure that I introduce our keynote this afternoon, Ms. Chiquise Newton. And folks, you are in for a treat. So first, let me tell you how it is I came to meet Ms. Newton. It was several years ago that the library actually had a seminar on effective communication, and Ms. Newton was our keynote. Well, folks, what she said stuck with me. Her tips, her enthusiasm, the sensible knowledge that she imparted, it will stay with you if it's what you want. So when we began discussing the speaker for this particular event, I thought the perfect opportunity would be today for her to showcase her powerful business savvy. This phenomenal woman of color has traveled the world and impacted many. So now here we are. Chiquise, as he said, is the president of Cardinal Consulting of Columbia. Professionally, she is a consultant and an award-winning presenter who speaks to groups around the world. In 2005 and 2009, Toastmasters International recognized Chiquise as one of the 10 best speakers in the world. Locally, the Greater Columbia Chamber of Commerce, they named Chiquise Newton its 2012 Young Leader of the Year. Chiquise has lived and worked in Europe and South America. She speaks Spanish fluently, basic Portuguese, and as she says, enough French just to get her in trouble. So personally, she's married, happily married, the mother of 2, and actively involved in the community. She works with world-class organizations like Microsoft and Walmart, and she is a student of success. Today you will learn one of the surprising secrets she has found that separates those who make a difference from those who don't. And she will make you one guarantee. If you embrace the ideas you hear today, you will make a difference, make an impact, and make history of your own. So ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Chiquise Newton.
Now, I'm a little bit nervous to ask you the question that you're about to hear, but I'm going to ask you anyway. See, about 4 years ago, almost exactly 4 years ago, I had a bad experience at an event. I was speaking at Women's History Month, not Black History, but Women's History at Olympia Middle School. There I was, 200 pairs of eyes were on me. We were in the cafeteria, so that leftover lunch smell kind of lingered. You could hear the squeaking of sneakers on the linoleum. And then I opened my presentation the way that I open a lot of presentations, with a question. So I looked out into the crowd and I said, who cares about Women's History Month? And there in the front row was this boy, baggy jeans, blue sweater. He's like, ooh, ooh, call on me, call on me. So I looked at him and I said, yes, sir. I said, who cares about Women's History Month? And he said, not me. I don't care. Yeah, see, I learned 2 very important things that day. Number 1 is you have to know your audience. So I decided right then I would never, ever ask a rhetorical question to teenagers again. But the second thing that I learned is that if you're going to ask a question, it's got to be a question that is so important that it doesn't matter what people answer. Doesn't matter where they go, it's going to move you forward. They call that law school 101. Anybody going to law school in the future? Exactly, law school 101. If you don't know that the answer is going to help you, don't ask them. My debate coach used to say, do not expect people to get on the stand and you're going to Perry Mason them. And they're going to say whatever you want. See, you're probably too young. You don't know who Perry Mason is, do you? Matlock? The Mentalist? All right, somebody? So with that in mind, I'm going to ask you a question, because no matter what you say, it's okay, but it's extremely important. And the question is important today, it's important this month, but it's really important for the rest of your life. And I promise you, that if you will listen to the answer to this question, and the answer to the question, 2 other questions that I'll ask you, you will position yourself to make a difference. You want to make a difference? You want to make history? So here's the question. Really, throughout the first answer that comes to your mind, I am ready. The middle school students have prepared me. Why is it important to study Black History Month? Really? Any reason? But I got to hear you. To know where you came from, absolutely. You want to know where you came from. Why else is it important to study Black history? So you don't forget how you got where you are? Absolutely. You need to know where you came from. They say if you don't know the past, those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. You have to recognize where you are and appreciate some of the things that we take for granted. Absolutely. Anybody else? This is the silent section. I know your names. That's why I introduced myself. Yes?
To know where you're going.
To know where you're going. So it's not enough. You have to know where you've been. You got to know your history. You have to know how you got to where you are today, and you have to know where you're going. Anybody else want to throw out an answer? Celebrate diversity so that others can enjoy it. Absolutely. Somebody else in the back. Ma'am, sir, I can't tell. 2 ma'ams. All right, so we know where we've been. We appreciate what we got. We know where we are, where we're going. We celebrate diversity, and we recognize that we've done some important things, and we need to celebrate those. Yes, ma'am? So you know who you're representing when you go out. I couldn't have said those answers better myself. I'm keeping my check, but those were good answers. Here's what I suggest. All of those answers are right, but here's one that you need to remember. Just because a story is untold and unsung doesn't mean it's unimportant. Hold my calls. Just because a story is untold and unsung doesn't mean it's unimportant, just like you were saying, those contributions that we've made. But here's the question. Yes, African Americans have made contributions that have been untold and unsung. But what about you? Have you made contributions that haven't been recognized the way that they need to? Do you want to make a contribution that will one day make history, that one day people will talk about and sing about? And that's what this is about today, to give you some tools. And what I promise you is that if you will listen, if you will focus, that when you walk out of those doors, you will be ready to make an impact, to make a difference and make history. And it's kind of like Stephen. When Stephen invited me to speak to your group, I did something that most people don't do. I actually read his entire email. I read it all the way down to the bottom, and he has a footer. He has this signature, and it's an African proverb. There are many versions of it, but what it said is this. He said, until the lions have storytellers, all the tales will glorify the hunters. Until the lions have storytellers, all the tales will glorify the hunters. Another way to say it is that those who win write the history. But another way to say it is that it depends on the stories you tell what you appreciate. And so one of the reasons that African American History Month and African American history is important is to recognize the good that we've done. But here's what I think. I think that sometimes when you use the word history, all you hear about are the heroes. You hear about the people that have done big things. Black History Month is often about Martin Luther King Jr. with some Harriet Tubman and maybe a little George Washington Carver. And then if you're feeling frisky, you can maybe throw in some, I don't know, Muhammad Ali on the side just to shake things up. But just because you don't hear about people doesn't mean they didn't make an impact. And just because we don't hear about you doesn't mean that you make an impact. And so what I'm going to talk to you about today are what I call butterfly moments. Ever heard of a butterfly moment? I hope not. It'll ruin my speech, so say no. Anybody here study physics? You study physics? Don't worry, I'm not going to pick on you. It's all right. So when I went to school, I went to Boston University. There I was, my very first physics class. All of the students were looking at the teacher except for one. because that one student was looking out the window at the snow. And she was thinking that back home in South Carolina, if it snowed that hard, everybody would get out and play. And she was thinking that if she was in South Carolina, she would make a nice snow angel. And she was thinking that she had no idea what Professor Smith just asked her. Anybody here faculty? We got any teachers in here? All right, students, have you ever daydreamed in class? Have you ever noticed that's when your teachers like to call you by name? So there I am in physics class looking out the window and I hear, Miss Newton. Yes, sir? Can you explain the law of sensitive? Can you explain the law of sensitive dependency upon initial conditions? That's what I said. I said, sensitive what, sir? He said, can you explain the law of sensitive dependency upon initial condition? You look smart, sir. Can you explain the law of sensitive dependency upon initial condition? No? Well, I said, no, sir. He said, what about this? Can you answer this question? He said, does the flapping of a butterfly's wings in Brazil cause a tornado in Texas? Can we talk about the sensitive thing again? He said, Miss Newton, what we are talking about today is the butterfly effect. Back in 1963, a professor named Edward Lorenz wrote a paper called Predictability. Does the flapping of a butterfly's wings in Brazil cause a tornado in Texas? But we're not going to talk about science. Don't worry, it won't get too deep. The essential question of the butterfly effect is this. Can a small act have a big impact? Can a small, seemingly insignificant action have a big impact? When I see a small moment that has a big impact, I call it a butterfly moment. And I believe that each one of you has caused one that has changed someone's life, but you know what? You may never know it, you may never see it. But just because it is untold and unsung does not mean it is unimportant. I think that all of you, each of you has made history before today. You have probably made history today, and you will make it when you leave. And I'll give you some tools that you can use to prove it. But first of all, do you believe it? Do you believe a small act has a big impact? Absolutely. Think about somebody who's made a big difference in your life. You got them in your mind? Can you see that person? When they made a difference, did a photographer show up and take a picture? Was there a news crew? Did somebody tweet about it right away so all your followers knew? Was it on Facebook the minute they changed your life? Probably not, because we have these moments that happen, and those are butterfly moments. I'll share the first butterfly moment that I remember. But first you have to come back with me. Y'all can follow me over here. Come back with me to 1970. Yeah, I know. You're like, I wasn't even born in 1970. It's okay. It's a pretend journey back in time. I was in kindergarten on the playground, and everything was perfect. The sun was shining, the wind was blowing on my face, and there I was, 5-year-old Shaquise. Now, to imagine me at 5 years old, what you have to do is you have to picture a sweet, shy, quiet child. Got it? Now imagine the opposite. That was me. So I was having a great day on the playground, and so was my teacher, Sister Kim, until she saw me coming. I walked over to her and I said, Sister Kim, look. And she said, Shaquise, did you walk over here to show me a piece of trash? Uh-huh. And you walked around it to come tell me about it? Uh-huh. Did you even think about picking it up? Uh-uh. Shaquise, pick it up. Does that sound profound? You're all impressed, I can tell. But what you have to understand is I was a very spoiled 5-year-old. I was the first baby. I was the first grandbaby. The sun rose and set on me. I didn't have to do anything at home, let alone pick up a piece of trash that wasn't my responsibility. But when Sister Kim said, pick it up, do you know what I realized? That when I see something that needs to be done, I don't have to complain about it. I don't have to talk to somebody about it. I don't have to ask for permission. I can fix it myself. Sister Kim's simple words have lived with me forever. And every person that I touch, everything that I do, I hear her encouraging me. Now, that was a butterfly moment. But Sister Kim, she is an elderly nun now. Do you think she ever sits around and says, she says her prayers and she says, Lord, I changed the world. I told a 5-year-old to pick up some trash. Take me now. I'm ready. Probably not, right? Sister Kim doesn't remember me, but I always remember her and the butterfly moment that she caused. And so the question is, have you caused a butterfly moment? Do you have gifts that you need to share? Not just your gifts. See, you just gave us your gifts, but sometimes just being who you are and where you are makes a difference. See, in Black History Month, we're celebrating those stories that are untold and unsung, but it doesn't mean they're unimportant. But you know what else Black history means? It means it doesn't have to be the big thing, the big hero that we celebrate. We all talk about Dr. Martin Luther King, and I mean him no disrespect, but do you know what? There were an army of people behind him who did simple things and made it work. Yes, we celebrate Dr. King, and he deserves it. But should we celebrate the person who was afraid to lose their job and went out anyway? Should we celebrate the people who put their feet on the street and they marched? See, all those stories are untold and unsung, but it doesn't mean they're unimportant. And so I ask, have you caused a butterfly moment that has changed the world? Now, when I tell the story about Sister Kim, some people say, oh, but Sister Kim was a teacher. It's her job. She's supposed to change people's lives. I'm just a student. I just do whatever it is that I do. And you know what I say? Your job title does not determine the difference you make. Whatever it is that you dream to be or want to be, whether you have that title or another title, it doesn't limit the effect that you have. I learned that from somebody named Jessica. 5 years ago, at the lowest point of my life, my mother had died and my disabled brother came to live with me. Now, what you have to know about my brother Robert is he was born with an extremely rare birth defect. It affected 1 in 10 million children. Average life expectancy was 1 month. After that, people lived to be 3 months. My brother Robert lived to be 30. And he made a difference in my life, not because he could talk, not because he achieved great things, but because of who he was. But when Robert came to live with me, despite all his health challenges, then we heard the C word. Robert had cancer. So I took Robert to his very first appointment at South Carolina Oncology Associates. It is kind of what you would get if a hospital and a hotel had a baby. It's a very strange place, so it's kind of cheery and kind of scary all at the same time. So I am sitting there and I'm watching all the faces, the women wearing hairless hairdos and scarves, the baseball caps, the frowns, the concern. And as I look over into the distance, there's a woman. And every group of people that she talks to smiles, and she moves to another group and she talks to them and they laugh, and she moves to another group and she talks to them. And now I can't wait. I can't wait for her to come and talk to me. What is she gonna say? And she comes to introduce herself, and I said, Are you the Goodwill ambassador? She says, no, I'm just Jessica from housekeeping. I wanted to say hello. And as she walked away, she turned and put her hand on me and she said, don't worry. Your brother is in excellent hands here. Just Jessica in housekeeping told me the words that I needed to hear. She gave me the comfort to face another day. See, Jessica knew that her job wasn't just to take care of the floors, but her job was to take care of the people. Jessica knew that her job title didn't determine the difference she made. Jessica knew that if nobody told her story and nobody sang her song, that she came and did what she needed to do. Jessica made a difference. She made an impact and she made history. Now, does Jessica remember me? Probably not. But I will always remember Jessica and her butterfly moment. So I ask you again, what have you done by being who you are, by bringing what you bring? Whose life have you changed and what have you done? Now I know what you're thinking. You're like, Shakis, it's the end of the day. Thank you for telling me your story about your trash when you're in kindergarten. Thank you for telling me about Jessica and housekeeping, but what in the world does that have to do with Black history? Well, what do we say about history? In history, we always hear about what? We hear about the heroes, the people who did big things. Well, let me ask you this. Raise your hand if you have ever heard about Norman Balog in Black History Month. Ever heard of him in Black History Month? Well, there's a good reason why you haven't. It's probably because Norman wasn't black. But here's what he's known for. Well, he wasn't. Not everybody can be. So here's what he was known for. They called him the man who saved 1 billion lives. The man who saved 1 billion lives. So Jessica just comforted me. Sister Kim just gave me some advice. But Norman saved 1 billion lives. Do you know how? You probably wouldn't be excited by the details, but he did specific research on agriculture. And he created wheat and grain that would live so that poor countries in Africa, in Latin America, in India could continue to harvest their crops and live. He won the Nobel Peace Prize. He was recognized for all his work in agriculture. By the time he passed on, he had saved over 2 billion lives. Do you think that made a difference? Do you think 2 billion people that are alive to live and do things makes a difference? But he celebrated, right? We're singing his song. He won the Nobel Peace Prize. How much louder can they sing the song? You want to know the interesting thing about Norman? Norman was appointed to the job where he did this research by Henry Wallace. I'll refresh you on your history for those of you who aren't history majors. Henry Wallace was the vice president under FDR from 1941 to 1945. Henry Wallace also was not a black man. But Henry Wallace loved agriculture. And he looked for just the right person to do this project who would go on to save 2 billion lives. But what does that have to do with Black History Month? Well, when Henry Wallace was 6 years old, he went to visit his father at school. His father was a professor at the University of Iowa. His father was probably tired of having little Henry on his heels, so he said, "Henry, please go with my student. Go on a botanical expedition. Just go do something." You're not parents, but when you're parents, you'll know that there comes that point where you just go do something outside. Please. Who's 19 years old? 19. So Henry went out with a 19-year-old student, a 19-year-old student who loved fields, who loved farms, who loved agriculture, a 19-year-old student who instilled in Henry on all of his botanical expeditions that you could do great things with agriculture. The 19-year-old student's name was George Washington Carver. Before George Washington Carver created over 100 things to do with the peanut, before George Washington Carver became our staple of Black History Month, before anybody ever knew about George Washington Carver when he was your age or not very much older than you, George Washington Carver caused the butterfly moment by bringing what he had to bring, by doing what he had to do. And so I ask you, have you caused a butterfly moment that has made a change? But now, here's a question. We talk about the heroes and we celebrate them, and I've talked to you about the butterfly moments that you've created. Do you want to make a big difference? Right? You don't want it to be small, right? You want it to be big. But how do you make a big change? How do you make a big difference? How do you take that big dream that you want to achieve and make it happen? It's just like with a butterfly moment, a small act can have a big impact. But first, you got to be observant. This is going to be challenging, the way that you're spread out. Everybody stand up. Stand up. I hear you groaning. Grab a partner. And when I say grab, I mean that in the politically correct, HR sanctioned, I don't want to hear about this later kind of grabbing way, right? Have a partner. Don't really grab them. Okay? Now, you just need one partner. I know you got such lovely ones to choose from, sir, but you still only get one. All right, now turn away from your partner if you've got room. Put your back to your partner. You're back to back. Now that you are not facing your partner, I'm sorry, you can just observe, Stephen. You can be my monitor. I don't know how that's going to work. Somebody might need a partner. All right, you're not facing your partner. Here's what I want you to do. Take 60 seconds. I'm looking at my watch. Change any 13 things about your personal appearance. Go. Excuse me, the choir is complaining. Change any 2 things. Take your jacket off, change an earring, put your collar up. I don't want to give everything away. Change any 2 things about your personal appearance. Got it? You can observe. Okay? Got it? Now turn back and face your partner. Whoa, hold on. One person's still changing. Okay, sorry. Now let me remind you while we're doing this, this is a family show. This is a family show. All right, now turn back around and face your partner, see if you can see what changed. See if you can see what changed. No? Can't tell? You give up? All right, I see you trying to figure it out. All right, stay standing. Turn away from your partner and change one more thing. One more thing. Remember, this is a G-rated show, people. I don't want to read in the evaluations. It was good until we started taking our clothes off. All right, change one more thing. One more thing. It doesn't have to be a big thing, just one thing. All right, turn back and face your partner. It's all right, you'll be okay. You'll be okay. All right, everybody, be seated. Be seated. Be seated. Thank you very much. Those of you who had to move to find a partner, I appreciate it. So you are very smart people. You're very observant. What did you notice? Why did I have you do that exercise? What was that about? I don't know who said that. See if you're observant. That is a fantastic answer. That's not the one, but it's still fantastic. Anybody else? Why did I have you do that? To see if you notice the change. Absolutely. You got to notice what's going on in your life if you want to reach your goal. That is a wonderful answer. That is not the one, but it was wonderful. I enjoyed hearing it. Anybody else? Why did I have you do that? I'm just going to stand still. I'm getting kind of dizzy in the lights. Anybody else got an answer?
So you can see how small changes are hard to notice.
So I can see how small changes are hard to notice. That's not exactly it, but that is so close. Close on the counts on horseshoe stuff. I'm just kidding. That exercise was about change. Now let me ask you this. How did you feel when I asked you to change 13 things? Yeah, you were thinking it was not going to be a G show, right? That's what you were thinking. Yeah, so you felt a little uncomfortable. How did you feel when I said just change 2 things? Did you feel better? Now let me ask you this. When I asked you to change one more thing, could you do it? How'd you feel? Baby steps. If I'd asked you to change one more thing, just one more thing, could you have done it? You don't have one more thing. Look, you got like 12 bracelets on. You couldn't do one at a time? I can count those things from here, 2, 4, 6, 8. You got a necklace, you got 2 earrings, 2 shoes. Well, you started big. I said change 2 things. For most people, if I'd asked you to change one more thing, could you have done it? See, you would have found a way. And if I'd asked you to change up to 12 things, you could have done it. Now, have you ever met anybody in your life, they're big on talk, low on action? It's all about, oh, I'm going to do this. Now, don't point. Oh, I'm going to do that. And they never do it. And you know they're never going to do it. I used to live in Texas. In Texas, we have an expression. It's called all hat, no cattle. I didn't make it up, man. That's just what they say in Texas. All hat, no cattle. But the people that make history, the people that aren't satisfied with just butterfly moments, who want to make big things, you know what they do? They start small. Because a small step ends in success. You start in a step, you end with success. But the secret is you've got to keep stepping and keep stepping. Martin Luther King understood this. He said, take the first step on faith even if you can't see the entire staircase. What if he'd said, you know what? If we can't desegregate tomorrow, well, I'm just not going to do it. But how many times do people say, oh, you know, I can't make an A in this class tomorrow. I'm not going to do it. Oh, I can't get this job tomorrow. I'm not going to do it. I was going to say they get stuck on start, but they don't even get to. They don't get to. They're just stuck in their minds, right? They're stuck on get ready. But the people who make history, who make a difference, they know. They know that a small act has a big impact. They know that they cause butterfly moments, but they know that they have to take a step. Just a small step. Because it is so easy to get overwhelmed in the things that you want to do. When you look at your degree, it's so far from now, but you know what? It's one class at a time. It's one day at a time. It's one credit at a time. When you feel overwhelmed, what you have to say, you know what? If I start with a step, I'll end with success. Remember that exercise, except for you, with your 12 bracelets. You have to think of a different one. But you just take one step and one step. Start stepping and keep stepping. Right? Are you with me? Turn to your neighbor and say, I make a difference. But you've got to believe it. When I coach salespeople, I tell them the first sale is to yourself. If you don't believe it, then nobody else will believe it. Your small acts cause a big impact, and what you have to do is break it down. So here's the formula for your big dreams and your big butterfly moments. I think I promised you a Black history story that you would have never heard before, and here it is. You have probably never heard of Muriel Catherine Nesbitt. That's what it says on her birth certificate, but I knew her as Muriel Catherine Newton, and she was my grandmother. Proof that it doesn't matter where you start but where you finish. Doesn't matter how much money you have or what color you have or how much education you have. Because see, my grandma Cat was born in Harlem in the Depression. Don't know if you've ever had a hard time, but she was raised in a building that had no water. So every day she would get up and put on her thin little coat. The holes in the soles of her shoes were stuffed with newspaper, and she would walk to fetch water. I could tell you it was uphill both ways, but it wasn't. But it was darn cold in New York City. In 1968, Muriel Catherine Newton, she moved to South Carolina. And you know how it is when people come from up north. She was a native New Yorker. She had this vision of magnolias, sitting on the porch swing, sipping iced tea. The reality was heat, humidity, and the South Carolina state bird, the mosquito. She moved here in 1968, but in 1970 her life changed because my grandfather was killed in a sudden car accident. So instantly she became a single parent to 5 children in a strange land with strange customs. But before she had time to even grieve, she got word from the school district. This is 1970, okay? You may remember that not far from here in Lamar, where my husband is from, there's a bus ride in 1970. How you got to school and what school you went to was very important. And they got word that the neighborhood where my grandmother lived, Eastway Park, was going to go to a new school. That's fine. And the district would not provide a bus. See, the district had a policy. If you lived within 1 mile of school, they would provide a bus. But Eastway Park, where my grandmother lived, was 9/10 of a mile. You're thinking, that's not a big deal. It's not far, right? Here's a problem. For the children to get to Atlas Road Elementary School, they had to cross a highway in the dark and walk down a road with no sidewalk in the dark. Muriel Newton said, not for 1/10 of a mile will we send our children into the darkness down a dark highway with no sidewalk. So she called the school district. She said, will you help us? And the district said, no, 9/10 of a mile, you need to walk. She called her legislature. She said, will you help us? And the legislature said, no, it's 9/10 of a mile, you need to walk. So she called her neighbor. She said, will you help us? And her neighbor said, Catherine, what do you need? She said, I don't care who you are or what you do. I don't care if you have children or if you don't. I don't care what it is that you bring to the table. We need everybody on board at a neighborhood meeting. So there was one person who put out flyers. There was one person who brought food. There was one person who did a phone tree. There was one person who organized everything. This was April. They had until August 5th to find a bus so that they would not send their children into the dark. What leaders know and what people know who want to make history and make a difference and make an impact is you start where you are. You start with a step and you end with success. But you always look and say, what do I have? You ever met those people that are always complaining, I don't have this. And I would do it if I had this. And if I had that. Right? Someday, there's a speaker, what is his name? Brian Tracy. He talks about people who live on someday Isle. Someday I'll have enough money to do what I want. Someday I'll have enough education to do what I want. Your job is to vote yourself off the island. Get off of someday Isle. Small step ends in success. So she called everybody together. And you know how it is when you're getting ready for school. The beginning of the summer is a whole lot slower than the end of the summer. And there they were, August 1st, and they still had no solution. The district would not provide a bus. So at one of the meetings, somebody, I think his name was Leroy Smith, it was a long time ago, he stood up and he said, you know, I really don't know what I can do, but I'll make this phone call and I'll see what happens. August 5th came, and the school district provided no bus. So all the kids got ready for school, the parents grabbed their hands, and they walked out into the darkness. And they walked until they got to the bus stop. But instead of a Bluebird bus from the school district, it was a city bus because Leroy Smith remembered that one of his friends worked for the city. He said, and I wonder if I call and say we cannot send our children into darkness for 1/10 of a mile if he would provide a bus. So the children of Eastway Park rode a bus in the darkness down the highway to school. Small steps. You start where you are. I think it was actually Franklin Roosevelt who said it's the greatest of all mistakes to do nothing because you could only do a little. Start where you can, where you are. Those small acts had a big impact, and those children who went to Atlas Road Elementary School are now adults. They are your doctors and teachers and lawyers. For all you know, they have touched your life or will touch it in the future. Maybe you'll touch theirs. Because people who want to make a difference and make an impact, the people who make history in Black history, American history, and other history know that you start where you are. You do what you can, and you leverage your strengths. But here's a question. Was it Grandma Cat who made that happen? Or was it the person who put out the flyers? Or was it the person who did the phone tree? Or was it the person who called SCE&G? Everybody came together to make it happen. When you study Black History Month, when you study success, when you study your life, start where you are. A small act has a big impact. If you start with a step, you end with success, and everybody comes together to make a difference. Whatever your gift is that you have to give, you are making an impact. And if you know that you can cause a butterfly moment, if you know that you can change somebody's life without even trying, if you know that you can achieve your dreams just by taking small steps, then the question is, what is the limit? And the answer is, there's not one. History does not stop here. It's not in the past. You're making it today, you're making it tomorrow, and you're making it every day of your life. Go make more history. Thank you.
All right. I would like to say thank you again, Ms. Shakise Newton, for your profound message today, and that it brought us back to reality about African Americans and where we shall stand in our society. I'm going to go a little fast on this and everything. I just want to say a little bit of things about what she said. But the fact of 22 years of living, I was able to meet plenty of people and everything like that, and able to have plenty butterfly effects. One coming from you, Ms. Newton, and definitely coming from Mr. Lightbourne today. I was just talking to him while we was listening to YGB and everything, and noticing how we all make a change and keep on reminding to motivate one another. So that's one of the things I really want you to realize, that those things are very much true, and how we get to where we need to be at every day in our lives. All right, we're going to go to the closing remarks with Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the Office of Multicultural Affairs, and also with the African American Faculty Staff Coalition, we do thank everyone for coming out, participating. Didn't draw as big as a crowd, but I must say that small, you can start off small. Everyone in this room can make a difference, as our speaker said, and let's give her another round of applause. That was wonderful. And I definitely got to take some of that back and use that, because in everything that we do or whatever, we can make a difference, like she said. And one of the things that I always tell people is that in order to make a difference, you have to be different. Everybody can't be the same. The hand can't say to the foot that I don't need you. We all need each other, no matter who we are, no matter where we're from. And I thank everyone for coming out, and y'all have a great evening. Bless you.